So we're continuing our series this morning on wholeheartedness. And I was sitting there thinking, in the face of what is currently happening in Texas and Louisiana, I don't want to be disconnected from things. There's that fine balance that you move through of continuing on the thread that I believe God has us on here, but not being disconnected with the realities around our nation and around the world. This morning, what we're going to look at is a guy whose name is Caleb, and I kind of gave a teaser on Facebook. Those of you that don't do Facebook, you wouldn't get the teaser anyway, so it's all fine. But Caleb, his name literally means wholehearted. I mean, how awesome is that the man's name is wholehearted? And we're going to look into his life and kind of pick up where his name is first mentioned and see how he lives out his name. And so if you were to give today a message title, or if I were to give one to you to write down, it would be titled Insurmountable. Do the best you can with the spelling. It's okay. Insurmountable. Wholehearted people can engage and overcome what may appear to be insurmountable, but it requires wholeheartedness. There are no half-hearted victories. You've got to be all in. And what we're going to look through today is a painful lesson, inspiring around a man, and kind of not so inspiring around a nation. I want to err on living my life like the man and not like the nation. And so today we're going to have this conversation about wholeheartedness in the face of what may seem to be insurmountable, unable to be accomplished or overcome. Those type of moments require wholeheartedness, period. So Numbers, again, I love that these books that we've been going through, like First Chronicles. How many of you just get goosebumps when you hear that name? That's where we were last Sunday in First Chronicles. Actually, it is quite a phenomenal book, a couple books of the Bible. We're going to be in Numbers chapter 13, and we're going to be very different this week than we were last week. Last week we looked at 2 verses. This one we've got chapters to look at. And so I'm just going to dive right in it. We've got 26 minutes and 30 seconds to make this happen. All right? Let me set the stage for us. At this point, the children of Israel are fresh out of Egypt. They had been slaves there for 400 years. God miraculously brings them out. Some of these stories might jar in your memory of like childhood, but the children of Israel miraculously get brought out of Egypt, and they are 2 years. Now, that may seem like a long time, but in this comparison to 400 years with their identity as being slaves, now they are newbies. They're in the honeymoon stage, if you will, of being freebies, and they have this moment. Let me just hit some moments that they've been through. They walked through water on dry land. None of us have ever done that before. At least nobody's ever shared that. If you did that, if you went through Lake Erie on dry land, I would love to hear about it. That happened. Then, not only that, but they are being led by a pillar of fire at night and a pillar of smoke by day. I don't see that today. And it was daily, right? So that was what their daily life was like. Then they start complaining about not having stuff to eat. So then miraculously, God drops Wonder Bread down for them to eat. It wasn't packaged or bundled, but it was nonetheless, it was bread. Every day they had bread. Then they're like, we're tired of this bread. We want some meat, which I totally get. I mean, it took them a while to get hangry. I would have gotten there way earlier. So God not only drops bread, but then he drops birds in their lap. And this is what the Bible says, that they ate it till it came out of their nostrils. I've eaten a lot of food in my life, but I've never had my food come out of my nostrils. So they ate and ate and ate, and then they're they're just finding things to complain about. And they're learning how to follow this God. This is a 2-year journey so far. That, again, that might sound like a lot. But compared to 400 years of slavery, they're fresh on the scene of following this magnificent and mysterious God. So God instructs Moses to gather the leaders. And I say this all the time. There is no Hebrew word in the Old Testament for leader, but there's actually, they kind of dance around it without actually having a word for leader. The word that God says, when God says he spoke to Moses, go and get a leader from each of the tribes. There are 12 tribes at this point. Leader in that word means a mist, a rising mist. If that doesn't settle in the heart of any leader, I don't know what does. You are but a rising vapor that can be recognized, but once it gets so far, you disappear. That should give you sober understanding, let you know that you're not all that. So let me gather 12 rising vapors, rising mist. I'm going to send you guys into the land that we know that God has promised us, and you guys go there, tour the land for 40 days, and then come back. And so that's where we pick up. The team involves Joshua, which I totally connect with, obviously, because of my name, and then a young man named Caleb, whose name means wholehearted. And if you're curious what Joshua means, it just means Jesus. Like, it's just a different version of Savior. So anyways, I think that's kind of cool. I understand at the same time that I am nothing more than rising mist. Okay? So Numbers chapter 13 goes like this. The Lord said to Moses, send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of each of its rising mists into the land. So they do. They jump down to verse 16. Verse 16 just says, those are all the names. We're not going to go through all the names. So verse 17, when Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, go up through the Negev and into the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they have? Or what kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. And around this time, it was the season for the first of the ripe grapes. So they went up and explored the land. We're not going to read what their explorations were like, but in verse 23, at the end of verse 23, it says that 2 of them had to carry a pole between the clusters of grape. Like they would just put a cluster of grape on this pole, and it was so plentiful that they had to have 2 people to carry it. Anybody eat any grapes like that before? Like, those sound delicious, right? With some like fruit dip, with some, Miracle Whip and cream cheese. I'd tear that up. They didn't have that then. But at the end of the 40 days, they returned. This is verse 25. At the end of the 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. The 12 leaders, the 12 rising mists of leaders come back. Verse 26, they came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly, showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. Now, it doesn't say this, but this is how I think the story goes. I think Joshua and Caleb issue the first couple of statements, and then the rest of them tell the rest of the story from their perspective. So this is what I think. I think Joshua and Caleb take turns sharing this. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Now, that doesn't literally mean that their rivers are of milk and honey, and they're not walking around and like that's not what it means. It means that there's a lot of cows, and there's an abundance for bees to have habitation. And so I bet it was very flowery and beautiful, and the scenery was breathtaking. The land is flowing with milk and honey. It's a rich, rich region. And here is its fruit. And I don't know if that's Joshua's part or Caleb's part. I don't know. But they're excited, and the reason why I say that is because I'm one of those people that I just like to look to the positive of things. Any of you ever meet somebody like that? Like, it could be the worst day ever, but it's like, okay, I understand all that happened, but what's the good? You still got breath in your lungs, right? You're still living, right? Nobody robbed you today, right? Like I just try to look to the positive of things. And so I bet you that was Caleb and Joshua at the very beginning, because immediately they throw a big butt in the middle of their presentation. And I bet you one of the leaders had a big butt because he just like butts in. He's like, but let me tell you the way I see things, okay? Let me just put a block on Joshua and Caleb and tell you what I saw. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. Now, I'm not going to land there, but for your own kicks and giggles, write that down. Write down the descendants of Anak and research that one, because it's kind of crazy who they are. They're essentially giants, the descendants of Anak, okay? So there's massive people there. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. And you can begin to hear the gasp in the assembly of all the Israelites, like, oh no, oh my gosh, there's big people there, and it's fortified cities. And you begin to have this angst swirling around the community, right? And it's beginning to be this murmur and to a louder concern. Then Caleb, a.k.a. Wholehearted, interjects. That's what I love about wholeheartedness. Wholeheartedness interjects in panic and chaos. We need more wholehearted people in the chaos of our world. Not obnoxious people. I'm talking about wholehearted who are bought into the truth of who God is. So I'm not going to get swayed by news. I don't want to get swayed by news, because I want to be wholehearted on Him, not wholehearted on news reports. This is what it says. Then Caleb silenced the people. So we know they were murmuring. We know that they were panicking because they needed to be silenced. That word there means hushed. I don't know if he got up there all like gangster, or like, hey, hush! Hush! Mr. whatever tribe you're from with the big butt end, get over there. Hush. He silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. What is it about wholeheartedness being paired with the ability to do it? You remember last Sunday when David gives Solomon the plans for the tabernacle, and he goes, do it now, right? So now Caleb says, we should go up and take the possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. I'll head to the chopper, right? Do any of you guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. Some of you are like, oh my gosh, he's going to preach the whole message like Arnold. He stops them for a moment. Now, I want to change it just a little bit. Wholeheartedness stops the panic for a moment and brings in truth. For a moment. This is the significance of what tribe you ride around with. This is what's important about what tribe you ride around with. We have another big butt, but this butt is even bigger than the other big butt, because this butt is the whole assembly. It's the whole gathering. They don't want to hear any of this wholehearted talk. Good job, Caleb. Way to be a little boy, full of courage, and bought into this God that we barely know. Yes, we see Him in dynamic ways, but we don't really know Him because we were slaves for 400 years, and now we're just 2 years in this relationship, and you think that we can just go in somewhere and beat giants? And I'm sure Caleb's like, we walked through water on dry, stinking land. Birds and breads fell out of the sky. Yeah, I think God can take care of some giants. But the men, it wasn't even the whole assembly just yet, but the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. They're huge. He's huge. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. Just had to. They're stronger than we are. And listen to what else they did. I jumped ahead of myself. Then they spread among the Israelites a bad report. If you're one into highlighting and circling stuff, write down bad report. Because from this point forward, all those other 10 that went and toured the land, all they are doing is spreading a bad report. Are there big men in this region? Sure. There's some big guys over there. But it's not to the degree of what they're about to say. They begin to spread a bad report about the land they had explored. This is what they said. Hey guys, I know Caleb's up there talking a good talk, but here's the reality of the land, okay? I'm sure they sounded like that. The land we explored devours those living in it. Yeah. You want to go there? You want to go to the land that devours what lives in it? And all the people we saw there were like huge. They're great size. We saw the Nephilim there. That's one of those, they're connected to the annex. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Bad reports have a tendency of delivering false information. We seemed like grasshoppers in their sight. I'm sorry, the 10 of you who are speaking these bad reports, if I were Caleb, I'd be like, who cares? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Naphtali. That's one of their names. I'm sorry. I don't care. They're huge. And we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same from their perspective. I want you to go ahead and start thinking about right now, because it is the question. There's going to be two questions today. One of them is on the connection card, one of them is not. What right now in your life do you have the thought of? What are you facing in life where you feel like an enslaved, diminished grasshopper? Because I want to tell you right now that if you have that perspective about whatever that is, that's a bad report. If you have that perspective about something right now, you're looking at a bad report. Let me say it one more time. If you think that you are a diminished, enslaved grasshopper in the face of something, you're bought into a bad report, church. Whoever those 10 tribes are, they're putting the words in your ear holes. You need to find another tribe. You need to find a wholehearted tribe. You need to find a Caleb tribe. You need to find a Joshua tribe. But the doctor's report says, I really don't care what the doctor report says. You know what else? But you don't understand what type of relationship I'm in. You're right, I don't. I don't think God has intended for us to endure some gross stuff in relationships, but then I also know that there are some people who are just being babies, and you need to like man up or woman up in your relationships. And I know that's like super vague, but you know what I'm talking about. that decision to do that thing, to pursue that relationship, or to get out of an unhealthy relationship, to get into the land that I'm supposed to get into, just makes me feel like an enslaved, diminished grasshopper. That's a false report. And look at the buildup. Watch this buildup. This is what happens. Now, this literally happened. But I think that we can, what do they call that? It's like a word picture. This is kind of like a word picture or a story picture of the vast majority of thoughts in our noggins. So the nation of Israel is like the nation of our brain. And when we buy into the report, watch this. Talk about escalating quickly. Watch this. That very night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. Any of you have, no, we didn't, by some people within my own family, I've been told that we're strict parents. I just think that I'm trying to parent the way that God wants me to parent. So if we were at the grocery store and they started to go down that road where they're like, they wanted something and we said no, and we just didn't let it get to the point where, have you ever seen the families where they have the child that's like, I want it! You ever seen that? I'm not as young as I once was. They raised their voices and wept aloud. Watch this. It keeps going. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, but Moses and Aaron weren't even the ones that gave the report. They're like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is Caleb and Joshua. They didn't say that, but I bet that was in their mind. And the whole assembly said to them, if we had only died in Egypt, or in this wilderness, why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? And that's not even the worst part. Our children and our wives are going to be plundered. They keep going. This is super dramatic, y'all. You might think I'm overreacting. This is a nation overreacting. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back? Gosh, wouldn't it be better if we went back to Egypt? I want to go back to be a slave. I'm talking about our minds, y'all. Not the nation of Israel. I'm talking about our minds. That's insurmountable. I would rather be bound than face that. Wouldn't it be better if we just went back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Now, here's another fun thing about the word leader. This Hebrew word is different than the rising mist. This word means to be shaken. So what they're literally saying is, let's find some dimwit that we can shake to believe what we believe and take us back to Egypt. That's what they're saying. I want to shake somebody into believing our story. Let's find another person that can be shaken by a bad report and lead us to the land of bondage that seems better than the land of promise. Talking about our minds, y'all. And the way our mind would work is that leader, let us find, I just want to shake a thought that rises to the surface and follow after that thought. And it have nothing to do with the truth of the promise that God spoke. Wholeheartedness is what's required. In the face of this dramatic scene, Caleb, it doesn't say much about Joshua, but I bet you Joshua's behind Caleb, yeah, bro, that's on point. Keep going. That's legit. Caleb slash Wholehearted is the one that hushed the crowds and said, let's go. Let's go. For we can certainly do this. Now, the way that the rest of the scene plays out is at the tail end of this nation of Israelite tantrum, God shows up at the doorway of the tent of meeting. So, what's going on down here? You know, nothing. This tantrum happens. God shows up. And all along, he's listening to the nation of Israel. Listening to their words, listening to what they want to buy into. And this is what he says. Because, I'm going to paraphrase the mess out of this, but just because it's in there, trust me. Y'all, from 20 years of age and older, who I led out of Egypt, and you saw everything that I've done, all of you that are 20 years of age and older, you remember that part of your tantrum where you said it'd be better if you just died in the wilderness? That's going to happen. I'm going to let that desire play out. Okay? And you're not. None of you are going to possess that land that seems insurmountable. Except, man, may that be said of us. May God say, except to us. Except for Joshua. His dad's name is weird, the son of Nun. And Caleb. And this is what it says in verse 24. You and Joshua, Caleb and Joshua, you guys are going to go into this land and take possession of it. Verse 24 says this, because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him. I will bring him. Let me just say that one more time. For those who follow God wholeheartedly, he will bring you into the land that he thought was a possibility, the land that he explored. You know, we can explore with our minds. There's this destination, maybe in your marriage or in your work relationships or any field of life. There is a land that you've explored with your mind, a good and fruitful land, a land of peace and promise. That in your mind, it's like in your sight, but it seems insurmountable. But you want to push away those thoughts and follow him wholeheartedly. That picture for your marriage, that picture for your workplace, that picture in other relationships is possible because it's he who will bring you there. And not only that, it gets better than that. Listen to the strength of this promise. I will bring him into the land that he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. The kids that don't even exist yet will inherit this land. Why? Because Caleb has a different spirit, and he serves me and follows me wholeheartedly. Can I just throw something out there? God has no time for gasping murmurs. and grocery store dropping tantrums. He doesn't have time for it. I mean, the nation of Israel were in the bird and bread aisle of the nation's grocery store, and they throw down a fit, and that's where they get to live the rest of their days. You want to throw your tantrum about things that you're not happy with? Guess what? You're going to live there. More sadly than that, you're going to live there so long, you're going to die there. Jesus, thank you for that revelation. Oh man, I just want to be so wholehearted that whatever that means for this community here. Because, listen y'all, there's a picture in my head of how God just might want to move in this region. And I don't want to be caught in the company of the complainers. I want to be swallowed up with wholehearted people that are going to go against whatever giants are in front of us. Heroin, I don't care. The breakdown of the family structure, I don't care. My heart and my hope, which I believe is rooted in God's heart and His hope, is that we would be a bunch of Calebs. And that we would interject in the senseless chatter of our region and bring a wholehearted reality of who God is. But it's going to take us, and it's going to require us to no longer view ourselves as enslaved, diminished grasshoppers. And that can even mean those that hold on to the good days of this church, your perception of the good days, and they were good days. God provided, God spoke, God moved. But listen, that's to build your faith for future days of how He moves. We're not supposed to camp out where He's already been. He wants us to move forward. Heaven is our destination. Heaven on earth is what we're supposed to be making this life all about. Connection card. What areas in your life do you see yourself as an enslaved, diminished grasshopper? Part two of that question is this. What bad reports need to die off in order for you to move forward? We're a few minutes over. I'm going to let us have a little bit more time this morning. Let me say that second question one more time. What bad reports need to die off in order for you to move forward? Go. This is you and Jesus time.